So now we've recognized 8 of our leaders to learn from, and each one of them in how they represent different and distinct part of the district leadership puzzle. And as we note in the report, and as you've seen here on the screen, each has been recognized with what we call a focus of strength that they bring to their game. But there is more going on here. We're going to step back a moment and look at some of these themes, more than just their longevity in communities or even their ability to effectively follow through on their vision. There's that job of changing mindsets that these leaders have to drive. How do these leaders persuade educators to embrace new ways of working? That's where my colleague, my wonderful colleague, Leslie Maxwell, will take us next.
Thank you very much, Jenny. We're going to move on now to our discussion with these 3 leaders and how they have created change in their school systems. My name is Leslie Maxwell. I am a staff writer for Education Week. I'm the author of the Learning the Language blog on English language learners, and I co-write our blog District Dossier on school district news and leadership. So as most of you know from firsthand experience, one of the biggest hurdles to any major school initiative or reform effort is changing mindsets, getting people, whether it's parents, community members, students, or school personnel, to embrace new ways of thinking and practice. These leaders we are about to hear from have done this in unique ways. They've ushered in major reforms and initiatives that involved very deliberate strategies to change mindsets. So with us to discuss all of this, we welcome back to the stage 3 of our leaders. Right next to me is Dr. Jonathan Bryce, who we met earlier. Dr. Bryce is currently the School Support Networks Officer in Baltimore City School System. He was hired in 2008 to take on one of the most vexing issues in urban districts, high rates of out-of-school suspensions, especially for minority boys. He led the district's rewriting of the Code of Conduct and developed an array of disciplinary options and alternatives for disruptive behaviors that don't involve taking kids out of school. Next to Dr. Bryce, we have Dr. Austin Obasahan, who is the superintendent of Duplin County Schools based in Kenansville, North Carolina. Dr. Obasahan has worked in public schools in Alabama, Virginia, and North Carolina. He's been a teacher, a coach, an assistant principal, central office director, and now, of course, superintendent. In Duplin County, Dr. Obasahan has taken to district-wide scale a college-for-all mentality and early college program in a district of nearly 10,000 students. And we also have Superintendent Valeria Silva. She is the leader of the 39,000 student St. Paul Public Schools in Minnesota. A native of Chile, Silva herself was an English language learner when she came to Minnesota 25 years ago. She has spent her career in St. Paul's schools, first as a teacher, as a principal, and director of English language learner programs for 8 years before she was elevated to superintendent. In a district where 45% of students are English language learners, Superintendent Silva led one of the first major efforts in the nation to upend the way these students were taught by placing them in mainstream classrooms with support from ESL teachers. Okay, so with those introductions, we're going to move into the conversation, and Dr. Bryce, we're going to start with you. You were hired to come in with a very clear directive to drive down the high numbers of out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. Can you describe briefly for us what the behavioral climate was like in the city school system when you came on board, and how teachers and principals were routinely dealing with disruptive behavior?
Wow. First, let me say thank you for having us here, and thank you for the opportunity. When I walked into Baltimore in 2008, what I found were just an out-of-control discipline environment where students in one school would receive an out-of-school suspension for being truant, and in another school would receive a 10-day suspension for throwing a punch, and in another school not receive any consequence for bringing a knife to school. And so what we really found was a complete lack of consistency across the board, and principals and teachers all believing that the way to solve problems was to remove students from school. So my favorite story is that I had a conversation with a principal when I first arrived, and the principal said, well, you know, we're getting an influx of those kids. I said, what do you mean, those kids? you know, the kids that are on the ankle bracelet. And I said, oh, you mean kids that have some sort of Department of Juvenile Services involvement? They said yes. And I said, so what do you do with those kids? He says, well, once we find out that they're on the box, we exclude them from school. So the biggest part or biggest concern that we had was, how do you build a coherent system that allows principals, teachers, parents, and students to all understand what the consequence for inappropriate behavior should be, and how do you make sure that everyone is following that process in a way that helps to reduce suspensions, improve the culture and climate of buildings, but ultimately helps to prevent the things from happening in the first place.
Right. Dr. Obasahan, it's your turn. Your district, which is overwhelmingly rural, agricultural, it does not have a strong tradition of college going. Yet you came in and you wanted to instill that by offering early college in all of the district's high schools. I think it was in one high school when you started as superintendent. And also to introduce the college culture at the earliest grades. Can you talk about how you started the process of building this district-wide as well as community-wide an effort for college for all?
I join my colleague and say thank you again for having us, a great opportunity. I think the community really, I was very fortunate to work in a community that was truly ready for transformation. And the desire to bring in innovative ideas was already there. The partnership with the community college was already there. The early college on the community campus with the great success, 99% graduation rate, 98% proficiency rate, that evidence was already there. We have a board that have outstanding leadership and vision for transformation and innovation. And what we started doing was bring the community together to have a shared vision. And the question we started asking ourselves is this: who among everyone in the community will want their child to not be successful, and no one want to volunteer their child. So that effort started building that collaboration and partnership across the county. The commissioner, New Schools Project, Job for the Future. So we all got together and took a tour to Hidalgo. And once we came back from Hidalgo, the mindset of our staff that went just changed immediately. And because we have the evidence at the James Plum Community College under the leadership of Dr. Rouse, we said with 99% graduation rate and 98% proficiency rate, we don't need to go to China. The evidence is right here. So why can't we scale it? So we started putting an effort doing town hall meetings and professional development, raising expectations for everybody: teachers, parents, superintendent, board members, commissioners, parents. So as that expectation, as we raise expectations, then the interest to buy into that philosophy started existing. And we have a motto called Unified Approach to Academic Excellence, which means every corner of our community must be involved in transformation.
Okay. Superintendent Silva, when you became director of ELL programs in St. Paul, describe briefly how ELLs were being taught in the district, where they were. They were mostly isolated, I think, from the rest of their peers, and what their instruction looked like. And also tell us, did you know from the outset in starting that job that you were going to start sort of a radical overhaul of instruction for these students?
Wow. I came as a director of English language learners to the St. Paul office, but I was still a principal in school. And I was a principal of Spanish immersion. So I knew the value of languages, how important that was. Also myself as a second language learner, I knew that whatever I was able to achieve, I wanted every child to be able to achieve. So when I walked into the program of ELL, which was very small, I realized that we were not identifying enough kids, that we were not providing services, and we were not keeping track of their performance as well as it should be. And most for all, we were using a very traditional at that time way of educating them. You put them all together, 30 kids, Ks 1, 2, and 3. They all speak different languages, and by osmosis or something like that, they would have to learn English. And the person that we hired was a brand new, usually, ELL teacher that didn't have content instruction, And we were able to staff those rooms with all-use books. And they were not, most of them, inside of the school. They were, most of them, there were most of them, it was like that drastical. Okay.
We're back up.
Most of them were outside in a portable. So then, looking at this, I went to the superintendent, and I said, do you really want me to make a change? And he said, yes. So then we started to transform those self-contained classrooms into no more of that, and then bringing the kids into the mainstream and getting the ELL teacher and the content and the elementary teacher to work together, that the students weren't missing anything. Because if they were not exposed to the standards, how are they ever going to be meeting the standards? So it was radical. But you start with few, and I decided that the best way to do change and transformation is to start with those who believe in your leadership, who were ready to do this. And slowly, but very rapidly, became the St. Paul public school model of collaboration across the state and within the district. And most for all, this change became the most important part that I saw. It wasn't only good for the kids, but it was also good for the mainstream teachers, that once they have ownership of those kids, that it wasn't the ELL teacher takes care of them, I take care of the others. We own all our students.
Okay. Well, I want to turn now to the actual challenge of getting people to change their minds, and what each of you had to do, and where you initially got pushback and how you addressed that. So Dr. Bryce, you were ensconced in the work of rewriting the code of conduct and developing the alternatives. Where were you getting the most pushback from, and how did you convince those skeptical folks that this new approach was the right way to go?
Unfortunately, most of the apprehension or the pushback came from internal folks, came from principals and teachers who felt initially that, oh, you're going to allow students to conduct themselves any way they want to, and there's not going to be any consequence. While on the outside, we had advocates that were really very supportive of our efforts to reduce suspensions. And so what I would say is, and what we started sharing with principals, we understand that there's a tension in the work. And the tension is you want a safe, orderly environment so that instruction and teaching and learning can take place. And so we recognize that. However, just disproportionately suspending and expelling children doesn't solve the problem. So what we had to do with principals is we actually had to walk them through a process where they would learn that based on some of the efforts that we were putting in place, they still had the authority to enforce the rules and to maintain a safe and orderly environment, but they didn't have to do it at the expense of sending students home, just willy-nilly. And so my favorite story, one of the things that we did to show the community and principals that we were willing to take this weight on, we put one of our schools for students have been placed on long-term suspension and expulsion in district headquarters, right? So what we were trying to say is, we're not expecting you to carry all this weight by yourself. We'll actually build a school. It will be here. We walk past it every day. Our board members, the superintendent, cabinet, all of us, we walk past it every day. We can pop in. And that sent a signal to principals that said, we're all in this together. They're all our students, and we're willing to do some of the same work that we're asking you to do.
The Success Academy, right?
Success Academy.
Yeah. Dr. Obasanjan, what reactions did you get initially from principals and teachers and your school personnel about moving to College for All? Were there any skeptics about, can all students do this? Is this right for all students? Can we do this? Do we have the training and support?
Yes, of course we did. But the very good thing in our situation was we have a governance, we have a board that says, this is just not another initiative. This is just going to be the way of life in the entire county. And the support will be there, not just another new initiative, a new idea, a new concept, but we're going to provide consistent and continuous support. And so we started having town hall meetings. The Board of Education, James Brown Community College, the president who is here with me today, I'm very excited that he's here, and Mr. Persuade, our board chair. We went around the community educating our teachers, but I think the important thing about all of this is to value the input and the talent that our teachers and all stakeholders bring to the table. And reassure them that, listen, we are all in this together, like Mr. Jonathan said, and consistently respect their opinion, whether they dislike or agree. So I think that helped to change the mindset and help overcome some of those obstacles. Constant communication and an open, transparent conversation about why we're doing what we're doing. And the success that we have seen so far in our Canada is tremendous. And it is, I've never seen anywhere like that, to see a group of teachers who is taking the leadership, now leading the innovation themselves. So it's outstanding.
Well, Superintendent Silva, one of the major things you did was you got rid of weak teachers who were working with English language learners. That is no delicate matter. Can you take us through how you did that?
And I would just say it's not about getting rid of teachers. Many of the teachers were guided into, some of them went back into the mainstream because the new model wasn't what they were comfortable with. And we had many teachers who were elementary teachers, and at the same time they were ELL teachers. Some of the teachers realized that their fit wasn't there. And also, we counsel people. If you were in a school and you were part of a team and you work with the second grade teachers, then literally I would ask every second grade teacher to give me a little piece of paper that says, I would like to work with. So at the end of the day, I put all the little piece of papers of all the teachers, and when I found one teacher that nobody wanted to work with, I brought it up. I said, do you want to work in a building that really nobody wants to collaborate with you? Not that way, a little bit nicer. And it was secret, you know, I was the only one who knew that. And then because I knew the schools quite well and the teachers, I said, I think you would fit better in this building. And we started that way. And it really, at the beginning, it was a total cultural change that I would say to a teacher, I would like you to move to this building. But at the end, they would come back in like 6 months and say, that's such a wonderful idea, because you give people a new start. And we all have made mistakes in our life. And once you're in a building, you're like in a whole family. And when they didn't click with you the first time, people don't forget. So we get the ability, or we move teachers from the elementary to the secondary. And many teachers also decided that it wasn't what they wanted to do. And most for all, we did the process that if you were not able to deliver the deliverables, you need to be dismissed. And we did the whole process. So this myth that we cannot exit teachers from their profession is a myth. If you do the process, you do it fairly, respectfully, and you show them the strengths and also the areas that they're not performing, it is the right thing to do for kids.
Can I just quickly follow up and ask, you know, how that went with the teachers union? Did you partner with them in this process? What was that back and forth like at the time? I
think now that I look as a superintendent with those eyes, I was pretty naive. And I never really went to the teachers union and I said, I'm going to start doing this, because that was not my expectation. That wasn't my expectation to start doing this in order to change the program. That's kind of the easy way out. I was expecting to work with the staff to get there. So then within the process, because I followed the process, and we got into situations in which the union and myself have to work together on an improvement plan, it was pretty well received. I don't believe there's a union out there that want teachers who can teach in their union and working with kids. It's about following the process and doing the right things for the adults, as well as we were doing for children.
Okay, great. Well, Dr. Bryce, one of the things that you and I have talked about before as a major challenge you had to address was there was a big lack of trust between a lot of parents in the community toward the school system, a feeling that, you know,
deservedly so,
that you know, that if their child acted up, the likely outcome was that they were going to be put out of school. How did you and your team go about rebuilding that trust with the community and those parents?
Building the trust was about making sure that we took steps that sent very clear signals to the entire community about our intention to care for all of our children. When school systems and schools unfairly suspend and expel students, you are sending a signal that the students don't matter, that we don't care about you. And so we did a couple of things. Number one, we revised the code of conduct in a way, and let me just say this, when people hear, oh, well, you revised the code of conduct, that probably took you, a week's time. That's really not the case. Revising the code of conduct because it has tentacles that reach to board policy, to district offices, and how those offices interact with parents. It impacts students' daily lives in schools, the lives of principals and teachers. It's really it is a huge tipping point or leverage point for schools to really control some of these issues. So number one, we put together a work group that had parents, students, advocates, principals, teachers, district staff, and we got in a room, and as I like to say, I'm going to feed you peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, some juice, but we're going to stay here until we work it out. And that's what we did. Over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, we just worked on what all the groups wanted. Then we built the framework, and we did community meetings where we went around and we shared it with the broader community. The other things that we did were we very clearly said to our community, we know that we have, as a district, pushed you out. And although I'm from Baltimore and graduated from Baltimore City Schools, having not been a district leader in Baltimore, but having been there, I had a cachet that allowed me to say, we were wrong. What we've been doing in the past isn't the way that we want to take care of children. And our superintendent is very clear. He says, children come as is. And our expectation is, once we get them, it's our job to work with them. So we started, much like I think the superintendent in Texas, we started something called Great Kids Come Back. We actively went out to get students that we had pushed out of schools, that had dropped out, and said, come on back. But we couldn't bring them back to schools that were the same because we knew that wouldn't work. So we had to create expanded alternative options that would meet the needs of students, allow them to be successful based on their life issues. The other thing that I already mentioned, we built Success Academy. Can I tell you, I'm walking down the hall at district office, and an executive director walks up to me and says, I just heard that you want to put an alternative school for disciplined students in this building. Why would you do that? I looked at her and I said, because it's the right thing to do. She stormed off. Glad to say that that person no longer works for us. But that is the belief. The belief is these kids have done something so wrong that they can't be returned to the regular school student body. And so what we had to do was send that signal through Great Kids Come Back, through building Success Academy in our building, that you're ours. We know you made a mistake. We know you made a bad decision. We're going to work with you to support you in your efforts to change how you conduct yourself and get you back to a traditional school.
Well, Dr. Obasanjo, you've mentioned briefly some of the key partnerships that you've forged on your early college effort, including with the local community college, the president is here with us, and a statewide organization called North Carolina New Schools to support your efforts. Can you talk about the role that those folks have played in helping Duplin County move forward with this?
Yeah. They've played a tremendous role. New Schools Project, for example, provide professional development and the support for us and the comfort level for our teachers. And James Brown Community College opens their door for that partnership. We'll be having that partnership for many, many years. And the kind of leadership that Dr. Rouse and the community college bring to the table is outstanding. And the faculty, we work together, we collaborate together, we even meet on a monthly basis, our staff and his staff, to discuss issues on how we can prevent our students from having to take remedial courses. We want all of them. Well, that's why we're starting very early to give them that proficiency so that when they enter college, they'll be very successful. I just want to say one quick thing, though, that sometimes when we talk about partnership or innovation, it does not always mean new ideas. Innovation also can mean changing institutional practices. And what we're doing now is looking at our institutional professional behavior and adjusting them and changing some of those things. So the partnership of James Brown and Duplin County Schools realizing that our teachers we have to change the way we view our teachers, and our teachers have to change the way they view our students, and vice versa. So that collaborative effort and that spirit of partnership and unconditional commitment to reach our destination. I just want to say this in closing. Talk about commitment last night. The commitment we have in Duplin County School can be summarized as this. If you board a plane from the airport and there's a time for departure, and once the plane take off, the plane would not turn back because I forgot my wallet. So that is a commitment we make as a community, that once we take off, we're not going to stop. We're going to be very purposeful. We're not going to, no distraction. We're not going to back off until we get to our destination. So that is the kind of commitment and the unconditional support that we have in Duplin County Schools.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Superintendent Silva, we have a few more minutes. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about, in your district, you have 45% of your kids are English language learners. That is hardly a subgroup. I mean, that's nearly half of your student body. Since changing the instructional approach in St. Paul, what impacts have you seen on achievement? If you could talk a little bit about in the intervening years.
First of all, we are about 137 languages, so I don't have, apart from one student, a large subgroup like Latinos across the country. I have many, many different languages, and most of my students are immigrants. So they come from another country, which is not always typical in United States. They get a lot of kids who were born here. So that is a very different challenge for all of us. But what I can tell you is my staff in general, all the teachers and administrators, today they look at the students who are coming from our refugees camps as an asset to the community, not as oh my God, I have to deal with this. So then we embrace their culture. We all as a community learn their culture. We prepare materials for teachers to understand where they're coming from, that the stereotypes were not formed. And most from all, it makes the students feel part of the school, and they were able to believe that what they're doing was the right thing. So with that, the test course itself, you knew that they're going to be changing. And today, we have the best test course in the state. Our students are performing and being able to graduate between 4.5 and 5 years, just coming from a refugee camp. And we have several amazing success stories. And we create an environment that says, yes, you can, and yes, you will.
Okay, great. Well, I think we have a few minutes to take some questions. We have one coming in from our live stream. Anne will read for us.
Yes, actually, this question came in through Twitter, and the question was, how can we best expand the impact to make systematic changes?
Wow, who wants to take that one?
I would say that systemic change in a district, in all of us, we have done in some way or another some kind of systemic change. It's in the industry, in the business, you take a model and you apply it to a different place. And we make that mistake in education. We think if my model works in St. Paul, it should be done exactly in each community. And I would tell you that's a wrong approach. If you as a district staff and personnel want to know that you're going to make the difference, take the model and try to see if it fits in your culture. And don't do exactly each step. Use the steps that the other person or the other leaders use, but adjust it. Because if your people in your building don't own the initiative, you're not going to move it.
Any questions from the audience? Oh, right here.
Good morning. First, I just want to commend all of you for what you're doing for our children. My question goes to Dr. Bryce. You talked a lot about what you did with the teachers and the principals. Can you speak a little bit about how you got the teachers and principals to adopt strategies that now would begin to change student behavior?
Yeah, so, and I think that's a great question. Two things that really help teachers at the start of the year as they're going through professional development and they're became acquainted with the revised code of conduct. One of the things that principals were very purposeful with them about is, okay, what are you going to do to address the minor behavior that takes place in your buildings? And what we came up with is the idea of it's about relationships. It's about making sure that teachers have contacted parents prior to that inappropriate behavior has occurred and have begun to establish those relationships. It's about setting expectations for students. And so our code, while maybe 3 pages of our code is what we call our matrix that outlines if this is the inappropriate behavior, here are the consequences in 4 different levels. The majority of the code is focused on our expectation for the positive behavior that students will exhibit, which is a huge change. So it's less about what you can't do and more about what we expect you to do and how we expect young people to conduct themselves. And that change in philosophy and in practice has helped many of our students.
Question over here.
I did have a question. I think it was pretty much related to my friend and colleague over here. Good morning, how are you? My question was very similar to my colleagues here. As a high school administrator, I continue to get an inordinate amount of discipline referrals from teachers. I am particularly more interested in how you shifted the paradigm of the teachers, particularly in regard to the kids with the ankle bracelets, because what I find is the comments from the teachers, these kids don't belong here anyway. So how did you shift the paradigm of those teachers to reduce the number of referrals that were being sent to the administrators?
Well, number one, our code is very prescriptive in terms of what students can be referred to the office for. And so because of the levels and because of the layout, it shows very clearly to teachers, principals, students, and their parents, what the range of consequences are. In terms of changing people's beliefs, I'm one of those folks, and we had a pretty vigorous discussion yesterday. Our focus wasn't on changing your beliefs. We're going to change your actions, because we believe that through changing your actions and seeing the success of young people, what ultimately happens is your belief changes because you see the young people conducting themselves in a different light. So one of the things we had to do, and I spent every week having conversations with the head of the local Department of Juvenile Services, head of the local Department of Social Services, to make sure that we were identifying any students that they had that were having problems and putting them through an SST process, a student support team process. The other thing that we also really focused on was our monitoring. You can't revise a code of conduct and have a suspension system and not monitor. What does Jack Welch, from former CEO of GE, say? What gets measured, what gets monitored gets done. And so the issue is we started something called Safety Stat. Every Friday, I looked at every suspension, every referral, every police report for our schools so that we could identify hotspots. We could start to drill down and say, well, school A is having an issue. Then we would send a team in to talk to the principal, walk through the school to figure out if it's coming from a particular location, like it's the hallway leading to the cafeteria, or it's the gymnasium, 3rd period after lunch. And then as you drill down, you start to identify, is it a coverage problem? Is it an individual problem who's actually there but not providing the level of support for students. And based on all of those things, we were able to really make some progress and change the dynamic so that teachers do not feel that they have to give up their authority and send a student to the office, but instead can work with the student to either prevent or change the behavior.
We have any other questions? We have one back here.
Hello, I'm Tony Fowler from the U.S. Department of Education. There's another, and at the risk of piling on Dr. Bryce, there's been an issue that I've been hearing about in terms of the testing culture and the concept of push out students, that schools are ensuring that certain segments of the student population do not appear on testing days so that the test results would not be affected. I was wondering if that issue came up in the context of your addressing discipline problems in the schools, and if it did come up, how was it addressed?
You know, it's interesting. So I certainly think that may be a problem nationally. That's not a problem in Maryland. And you know, I see Jerry Wiest, former superintendent of Montgomery County, who would probably concur. In Maryland, if the kid is there, if the student is present or not, you know, the school is still going to take a hit for the student's failure to be present for the test. So there's no advantage for a student being taught or told to stay home when the testing period occurs. I think what a bigger issue is, and you may want to look at this, is what happens after those state assessments are given and whether we see an increase in suspensions after that period of time, which is something that we do see and something that we want to make sure that we are monitoring and addressing. The same behavior that occurred prior to the test, that our code of conduct was very prescriptive and said that the maximum consequence should be a parent conference or detention, cannot suddenly, after the testing period, lead to a suspension or a proposed long-term suspension or expulsion.
I think we
Jerry,
have time.
was I on point?
Right on.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, here.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming and sharing your expertise with us. I have a question for Dr. Obasahan. I understand that a large number of your students are attending or being prepared to attend college. What have you done for students with disabilities, and what is their rate of attendance?
Good question. Thank you very much. I think when we talk about college, sometimes it depends on the definition of college. College means that every child who enters Duplin County schools will have preparation beyond high school. Whether that means a 2-year community associate degree or a goal to enter a 4-year institution or just a diploma or a certificate. If you want to be a plumber, always saying is be the best plumber in Duplin County. If you want to be a mechanic, be the best. So we have our EC students and ESS students that are excelling, taking college courses, even in the early college. We have students who are getting a degree. We're having about at least 20 credit hours beyond high school. So we're not looking at limitations. We are looking at developing that child's talent and preparing them for the workforce. I think too many times we put labels on the child's talent or where they come from or who they are. We don't look at that in Duplin County schools. That's the mindset we want to create. Every single child in Duplin County schools deserves to be successful. And whatever it takes, that is what we're committed to doing. And I think the unique thing about Duplin County schools and other schools is not that everybody knows this, is that the board expects us to make sure we do whatever it takes. With the right support, an EC child can get an AA degree too. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks very much for all of you. A round of applause for our leaders.